Rain hammered against the reinforced glass of the Earth Cultural Exchange Center, Sector 12, orbiting above the Terran moon. Inside the habitat dome, a dozen alien students gathered, their skin sheened with moisture from the high-humidity environment that kept most species comfortable. The lecture hall, a blend of human and interstellar design, smelled faintly of ozone and sterilized alloy. At the front of the room stood Professor Velinor, a towering, four-limbed educator from the planet Corvallis, known for his sharp patience and sharper expectations. Today, Valinor announced, gesturing to the center mat, you will observe how species react to environmental stress. Our subject will be human. Half the students leaned forward, some out of curiosity, others in thinly veiled apprehension. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Coalition, and stories about them had spread faster than verified data. Their biology was confusing, their tolerance for discomfort inconsistent, their behavior unpredictable. Rhett Langston stepped onto the mat, adjusting the collar of his standard-issue jumpsuit. He was tall, lean, with the build of someone who had seen too many field deployments. A faint scar ran down the side of his neck, barely visible beneath short brown hair. He gave a short nod to the room, then looked toward Velinor. "Ready when you are," Rhett said. Velinor tapped his console. "Begin the obstacle simulation." Holographic terrain shifted into place, angled platforms, hanging bars, rolling discs designed to test balance and dexterity. The kind of physical challenge that didn't faze Rhett. He moved through the first half with practiced ease, leaping across gaps, climbing narrow beams. The students observed in silence, taking notes, eyes tracking his every move. Halfway through the course, Rhett reached for a suspended bar, misjudged the swing, and slipped. He hit the ground hard, shoulder first. A loud crack echoed through the chamber. He didn't move. Professor Velinor stepped forward. Course pause. Medical drone status. The small drone hovered over Rhett, scanned, then beeped. Shoulder dislocation. No fracture. Joint misaligned. Rhett groaned and rolled onto his back, his face tight with pain. "Damn it!" The students murmured among themselves. Some looked concerned. One, a pale creature named Cervix, with translucent skin and wide, violet eyes, leaned toward its neighbor. "Should we assist him? That injury renders his limb non-functional." Before anyone could move, Rhett sat up slowly, gripping his left arm with his right hand. "Hold on," he muttered. "Mr. Langston, remain still," Velinor said. "Medical will relocate your joint." "No time. I've done this before." Rhett shifted his body, wincing. He braced his dislocated arm between his knees, took a deep breath, and yanked. A sickening pop filled the hall. His scream was short, sharp, and guttural, then silence. The students stared in horror. Rhett slumped forward, breathing hard, sweat pouring off his face. He blinked a few times, then raised his arm slightly, testing it. "Back in," he gasped. "Hurts like hell, but it's back." Cervix recoiled, nearly dropping its datapad. Another student, a scaled being named Dranil, muttered, He restructured his own limb." "I heard bone movement," said Lyrics, the smallest of the group, her eye ridges trembling. "How did he not lose consciousness?" Rhett chuckled weakly. "Came close." Velinor's eyes narrowed. That was not protocol. "No, sir, but I wasn't gonna sit here with my arm flapping useless for 10 minutes while a drone fussed over it." "Your decision was reckless." "Maybe," Rhett said, standing slowly, "but effective." That night, in the dormitory wing, the alien students gathered without Rhett. The footage of the incident had already circulated through the student network. "He did not even request anesthesia," Lyrac said, her voice tight. "Did you see his face?" Cervix added. "The pain was visible, and he chose it." "That level of pain tolerance isn't normal," Drenel said. "Is it?" "It must be," murmured another. "Humans are unpredictable. That's what they're known for. Or unstable." Word spread. The next morning, Rhett entered the dining hall and the room quieted. He felt the shift immediately. Polite nods replaced friendly waves. and seats near him remained empty. He ignored it, gingerly using his left hand to lift a mug of coffee. Professor Valinor approached his table and sat opposite. Rhett didn't flinch. He'd been expecting this. Your performance yesterday altered your classmates' perception of you. Many now regard humans as dangerously tolerant to trauma. Wasn't trying to scare anyone, just reacted like I always do. Perhaps, but you crossed a cultural boundary. Most coalition species require extensive medical support for such injuries. They do not understand. Improvisation. Rhett leaned back, careful not to strain his shoulder. Then maybe they should see more of it. We adapt. That's what we do. Valinor studied him for a moment. There will be a field training session on Darsalon 4. You will accompany the students as a liaison. Consider it an opportunity to recalibrate their understanding. Rhett raised an eyebrow. Field conditions? Temperate, harmless terrain, but unfamiliar to all of them. You'll be there in a supervisory capacity only. Do not engage unless necessary. Rhett nodded. Understood. The shuttle to Darsalon 4 launched 2 days later. Rhett wore a reinforced brace on his shoulder, per the medic's orders. Recovery would take weeks. Ligaments needed time. He could move, but anything sudden or forceful would risk redislocation. The students were quiet during transit, stealing glances but saying little. As the shuttle descended, the planet's surface came into view, rolling hills, thick forests, and a pale green sky. Hours into the trek, cervix fell into step beside Rhett. Your shoulder, does it still cause pain? Some, Rhett admitted. It'll heal. Takes time. Why did you not request help? I didn't want to wait. It's not about showing off. It's just, sometimes you do what you have to. Cervix nodded slowly, processing that. Later that day, the group reached a narrow ravine. A makeshift rope bridge swayed over the gap, anchored to trees on either side. Valinor issued instructions from the rear while the students crossed in pairs. Halfway across, a snapped vine sent one student tumbling. The rope caught him mid-air, but he hung upside down, suspended and panicking. Someone help, he shouted. Valinor called out, remain calm, do not move. The others froze. Rhett was already moving, carefully stepping onto the bridge. His shoulder ached with each pull of the rope, every movement a risk. But he didn't stop. He reached the student, clipped a carabiner into the harness, and slowly hauled him upward. By the time both were safely across, Rhett's face was pale, and he was breathing hard. You re-injured it, Valinor said. Yeah, Rhett admitted. Felt it go halfway through. Medical drone confirms partial dislocation, the voice chimed. Stabilizer, Rhett asked. The drone extended a brace, but Rhett waved it off. He sat on the ground and exhaled. Give me a minute, I'll reset it. No, Valinor said sharply, you will not. Rhett remained still. This time, the professor continued, you'll wait. Rhett didn't argue. Later, after the drone carefully realigned his shoulder and secured it, the students gathered nearby. None spoke for a long time. Then Dreno stepped forward. You risked more damage to your body to help. Yeah, Rhett said, because that's what you do. You fear pain, Lyric said. Of course I do, Rhett replied. I'm not immune, I just push through when it counts. Cervix looked at his arm, then back up. You could have made it worse. I know. And you did it anyway? Rhett nodded. For the first time, the students didn't look afraid, they looked thoughtful. The days progressed, and Rhett kept to the background, guiding when needed, observing otherwise. His arm remained in the stabilizer, and he followed medical orders strictly. When they returned to the orbital center, the students were different. They walked beside him, not behind. They asked questions not about pain, but about limits, choices, and risk. In the final debrief, Valinor summarized the experience. You have all witnessed a facet of humanity that challenges your understanding of resilience and decision-making. Pain tolerance is not a measure of superiority, but of context. It is a survival mechanism occasionally reckless, often misunderstood. Rhett sat in the back, his arm still supported, but his posture relaxed. Let this not inspire fear, Velinor concluded. Let it inspire curiosity, and perhaps respect. No one disagreed. 3 weeks after the Darsalon IV expedition, Rhett stood in the gravity rehab chamber of the Coalition Infirmary, one foot pressed against a resistance wall while his left arm, now free of the stabilizer, trembled under the weight of a 3-kilogram training rod. The muscles around his shoulder spasmed with each extension. Every repetition lit his nerves like a fuse. "Again," barked Dr. Huron, a squat amphibious specialist with a face like a collapsed sponge. "You're compensating with your trapezius. That'll tear if you keep cheating." Rhett gritted his teeth and pulled again, slower this time. The rod moved in a perfect arc, even as sweat dripped from his chin onto the sterile floor. "Good," Huron grunted. "Don't get cocky." "I wasn't." "You always do." "Don't." He collapsed onto the bench as Huron scribbled something into a datapad with a stylus that looked like a sharpened twig. "I'm clearing you for low-impact field work. No lifts above shoulder height, no overhead loads, and if you yank that joint again, don't come whining to me. I'll fuse it in place myself." Rhett wiped his face with a towel and stood. "Appreciate the concern. I don't like fixing the same idiot twice." He left the infirmary just after second meal and walked the connector corridor toward the exchange center. The structure shimmered faintly in the artificial daylight cycle, the walls lined with photos of interspecies collaborations, joint missions, hybrid construction projects, cultural ceremonies. A few of the newer frames now included humans. As he passed the training wing, he heard a commotion from the adjacent simulation chamber, then a thud, followed by a chorus of overlapping voices in at least 6 different tongues. Rhett ducked through the entrance. Inside, the terrain sim was locked in a mountainous configuration. Steep inclines, loose scree, jagged outcrops. Drenel was halfway up a slope, crouched beside a crumpled figure. Rhett jogged over, ignoring the twinge in his arm. What happened? Lyrics lay awkwardly, one leg bent under her with an unnatural inward twist. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, eyes wide but unfocused. "She slipped," Drenel said. The incline destabilized. Her leg— "I see it," Rhett cut in. "Don't move her." The leg was clearly broken, displaced tibia, possible fibular fracture, and judging by the swelling, a partial ligament tear. Rhett glanced at the sim console. "Why isn't the scenario paused?" "No one's authorized," said Cervix from the ridge. "Velinor isn't here." Rhett activated his wrist console and keyed in a field override. The terrain flickered and flattened instantly, leaving the group standing on a neutral floor. He knelt beside Lyrics. "Can you hear me?" She nodded faintly, jaw clenched. "Okay, good. You're in shock. Stay still. I'm going to stabilize the leg." "Don't touch it," she whispered. "If I don't, the swelling will cut off circulation and you'll lose the foot." Lyrics blinked, clearly trying not to cry. Her species wasn't built for trauma. Too many nerve clusters, too little subdermal padding. Rhett pulled a vacuum splint from the base wall unit and eased it beneath her calf, careful not to shift the bone. As he sealed the splint, she gasped. "I know, just breathe through it." The others stood back, silent. "There's a medical drone en route," Cervix offered. "I'm already here," said the drone, gliding in with a whir. "Vitals unstable, recommend sedation." "No drugs," Lyrics hissed suddenly, grabbing Rhett's wrist with a trembling hand. "I want to stay awake." Rhett looked her in the eye. "That's your call, but this is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know," she whispered. "I want to know how bad." The drone hovered uncertainly. "Proceed manually," Rhett said. "Minimal intervention." "Yes, field liaison." As the drone scanned for internal damage, Velinor entered, his gait more hurried than usual. He surveyed the group, then focused on Lyrics. "What happened?" "She fell," Drenil said at once. "The incline destabilized." "She refused sedation," Rhett added. "Wants to stay conscious." Velinor tilted his head. That is uncommon. She wants to learn how far she can go, Rhett said. Don't stop her. Later, in the observation lounge, the students gathered around the central display where Lyric's vitals were projected beside a skeletal overlay. The fracture had been clean, but the soft tissue damage was worse than expected. She'd torn nearly every ligament in her ankle. She shan't scream, Cervix said, almost reverently. Not once. She was in agony, Trenel replied, but she made it through. She watched Rhett, chimed in one of the others. She copied his method. She didn't copy, Rhett said, entering behind them. She chose. They turned. She didn't do it because I did, he continued. She did it because she wanted to know her own limits. Why did she ask to stay awake? Asked a soft-voiced student Rhett hadn't met before. Because pain teaches. Not always and not everyone, but sometimes. And she wanted to remember. That night, Lyric sat upright in her recovery pod, legs suspended in a hyper-oxygenated gel. Rhett visited, pulling up a stool beside her. You scared the hell out of them, he said. I scared myself. He glanced at the monitor. You'll heal fine, might even be stronger afterward. Do I want that kind of strength again? Rhett leaned back. That's not really how it works. It just happens when it has to. She nodded. Did it hurt the way you said it would? Rhett took a long breath. Worse. I didn't know it could be worse than what I felt. It always can. She laughed once, sharply. Then why keep going into it? Because sometimes it's the only way through. She leaned her head back, watching the ceiling pulse with the soft lights of the healing cycle. They don't understand you, she said finally. Not really. They don't need to. They just need to start asking better questions. 3 days later, Lyrix returned to the training wing in a mobility brace. She wasn't cleared for physical activity, but that didn't stop her from observing every simulation from start to finish. The others began rotating through support drills, one acting as medic, another as evac lead, another as comms. Rhett didn't run the exercises, he just watched. After a week, the group initiated their own scenario, an avalanche sim with variable conditions and no warning. Rhett received no heads up. The alert came in while he was inspecting a pressure valve in the lower corridor. By the time he arrived, Cervix was buried under a mound of simulated snow, and 2 other students were coordinating a pulley rig to lift debris. Lyrix directed the operation from a makeshift tent, her leg braced, eyes sharp. Rhett stood back, arms folded, and said nothing. When the simulation ended, Cervix emerged coughing but uninjured. The team gathered in a semicircle, waiting. You didn't intervene, Lyrix said. You didn't need me. Were we right to act? Yes. Did we miss anything? Your evac time was slow. You should have preloaded the med sled. Lyrix nodded. We'll fix it. As the group broke off to reset the sim, Velinor approached from the observation deck. They've taken initiative. They've taken ownership, Rhett corrected. Same result. No, one ends when the lesson's over, the other doesn't. Velinor paused. You've changed them. They changed themselves. I just made it uncomfortable enough to notice how. The professor looked at the students now arguing over pulley tension, recalibrating terrain parameters, and reassigning roles. They no longer fear your kind, he said. They're not supposed to fear us. No, but they did. Rhett watched as Lyrix adjusted her brace and stepped back into the simulation chamber. Good, he said. Now, they don't. Rhett stood ankle-deep in the flooded edge of the Arboretum training zone, his uniform soaked through to the knees. The simulated marsh terrain had malfunctioned, turning the ground to slurry and collapsing a third of the observation platforms. 4 students were already waist-deep in the muck, struggling to hoist out a supply crate buried beneath a tangle of synthetic reeds. Lift with your thighs, not your spine, Rhett called out, watching one of them lurch sideways with a grunt. Unless you're into ruptured discs. I don't have a spine, growled Vexil, a quadruped with a segmented torso and 2 rows of jointed limbs. Then maybe don't lead the lift team. I volunteered, Vexil snapped, tail flicking water. Yeah, I can tell. The crate gave a final squelch and popped loose, sending all 4 students sprawling backward in a wave of marsh water. Rhett stepped in, grabbed the floating container, and heaved it onto the drier slope, ignoring the splash that soaked his side again. "You're not supposed to engage," Lyric said, limping down the incline with a stabilizer strapped to her boot. "Observation roll only." They were about to lose the kit. They were about to learn how to pivot. "I'll write myself up." "Already did." She handed him a data pad with the infraction logged. He stared at it. "You're enjoying this?" "I'm practicing delegation." By midday, the Arboretum's hydro system had been recalibrated, and the artificial terrain drained with a low, gurgling hume. The students sat in a semicircle on dry stone, passing around nutrient packs and comparing injuries. A few bruises, one minor tendon strain, and a singularly unfortunate nosebleed from an impact with a branch that hadn't been there moments before. Rhett sat apart, wringing out his sleeves. The air smelled like wet bark and ozone. "Why don't they just give you a command post?" asked Drennel, chewing some spiced paste from a foil pack. "You're clearly more efficient than the training officers." "That's not the point," Rhett said. "They're not supposed to copy me. They're supposed to function without me." "You always say that." "Because it's still true." "What do you get out of this?" Rhett looked up. "The chance to make fewer mistakes than I did." The next morning, the Exchange Center's central communications hub glitched, sending a false hazard alert to half the orbital platform. Emergency protocols locked down multiple sections, and a full evacuation drill was initiated before anyone could cancel it. Rhett had just finished his endurance assessment when the klaxons began and the lights switched to red. "Containment breach reported in Deck 5, the automated voice announced across the intercom. "All non-essential personnel evacuate immediately." He was already sprinting. Deck 5 housed the xenobotany lab and the adjacent aquatics wing, which included 3 students currently cataloging amphibious hybrids. Rhett bypassed the central lift locked in emergency halt and climbed the manual access ladder 4 floors straight, lungs burning by the time he reached the upper deck. Smoke leaked from under the lab's outer seal. Rhett yanked the emergency lever, overriding the hydraulic locks with the authority code embedded in his wristband. Inside, the room was filled with haze from a shorted console. One of the aquatic tanks had ruptured, flooding the floor with ankle-high water and loose electrical wiring. Sparks arced from a terminal near the far wall. The students were crouched behind a containment barrier, wide-eyed but uninjured. "Move slow," Rhett said, stepping across to them, boots hissing in the water. "No sudden steps. Don't touch anything metal." The smallest student, a furred biped named Thallus, pointed mutely to a figure slumped beside the control panel. A maintenance technician, unconscious, one leg twisted beneath him. Rhett waded over, checked for a pulse, and exhaled when he found one. Weak, but steady. The man's shoulder was burned, not badly, but enough to warrant an evac. "Help me clear a path," Rhett said. They used a non-conductive tarp to drag the technician out of the water zone, then hoisted him onto an insulated dolly. Once clear of the hazard radius, Rhett flagged the med drone with an infrared pulse and handed over the casualty. As the drone stabilized the technician, Lyrex arrived with a security detail. She took one look at the scene and frowned. "That's twice in 2 days you've violated passive observer status. Next time I'll let the guy fry." "Not what I said." Rhett shook water from his hands, then stopped keeping score. "I'm not. I'm tracking patterns." Back in the debrief chamber, the students sat in silence while Velinor reviewed the simulation logs and incident footage. Rhett leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You will not always have a human nearby to improvise under fire," Velinor said, "and you should not expect one." "We know," said Cervix, "but we also know what it looks like now. Knowing and doing are not equivalent. They're closer than they were a month ago." Velinor's secondary eyes narrowed. "That remains to be seen." 3 days later, Rhett was called to Coalition Command for a review of his conduct. The tribunal chamber was clinical and windowless, with 3 counselors seated on elevated platforms. You've interfered with protocol on 6 separate occasions, said the lead counselor, a crystalline entity with light refracting through its body like fractured glass. Justified or not, this cannot continue. I was placed there to bridge gaps, Rhett said. That's what I did. You were assigned as a liaison, not a field operative. I didn't break rules to grandstand. I broke them to keep people alive. You did not allow for cultural variance in risk tolerance. You assumed your own thresholds were universal. Rhett's jaw tightened. I assumed that letting someone die when I could help wasn't acceptable. If that's a cultural mistake, I'll wear it. The counselor tapped a crystalline digit against the console. You will not be reassigned, but you will undergo a reintegration audit. You are to submit a full report detailing the logic behind each intervention, including alternate outcomes had you abstained. Understood. Dismissed. An hour later, Rhett sat in the mess hall, writing the report on a borrowed terminal. Lyrics dropped into the seat across from him, her leg finally unbraced. What did they say? Penalized me with paperwork. She pulled a protein wafer from her pocket and broke it in half. That's practically a reward. They think I'm reckless. They're not wrong. They're also not wrong about you being necessary. He didn't answer. You're not here to save us, she said eventually. You're here so we know when to save ourselves. He blinked once, then closed the report draft and pushed the terminal aside. You're ready, he said. We were ready the day we stopped trying to be you. That cycle, Rhett submitted his final liaison report. The summary read, Mission complete. Cultural comprehension achieved. Adaptive capacity demonstrated across all species involved. Recommend closure of human-led field involvement. No further action required. He left the exchange center the following morning. No ceremony, no farewell. Just another shuttle. Another station. Another place where someone might need to learn that pain isn't the enemy. Stagnation is.